Hey Gear Seekers, I'm Nick. We haven't checked out anything from Razer in a while, and when they said they had this, their new wireless 65% keyboard, I just had to get my hands on it to see if this thing was any good and to see what the deal with it was. And recently I've been pretty underwhelmed with Razer's product stack. You'd only need to watch any of our videos about the Tomahawk ITX and the Tomahawk ATX to know exactly what the story is with me and Razer. Anyways, we're here to take a look at this new thing, the Razer Blackwidow V3 Mini Hyperspeed. It's a bit of a mouthful. It's a 65% wireless keyboard, so let's see what's up. The overall design and construction is actually pretty solid on this keyboard. The keyboard itself weighs around 718 grams as measured without the wireless dongle. I actually did measure this because I couldn't find any weight measurements at all. It's 130 millimeters wide, 318 millimeters long, and around 34 millimeters high with the feet when they're fully extended. Overall, this thing is a pretty standard 65% size deck. The keyboard itself is pretty dense when you pick it up, and the chin follows the styling from the other Blackwidow keyboards with that illuminated logo, but it's quite pronounced. The included Type A to Type C cable can be used to either charge your V3 Mini or to use it as a wired keyboard. The USB Type C port is side aligned, which is no big deal. The keyboard also has a door on the underside that houses the little wireless dongle so it can be used wirelessly. Now, this is a fairly elegant solution, I think. There's also adjustable kickstands that have two different heights on it, and I think just all keyboards need to have this at this point. There's a toggle on the rear of the keyboard as well that allows you to switch between 2.4G wireless with the dongle, wired, and Bluetooth modes. The V3 Mini has per key RGB lighting, and all of that can be controlled in Razer Synapse. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Synapse, but for the V3 Mini, it gets the job done adequately. The keycaps on this are double shot ABS keycaps, and the font is actually pretty good. And if you compare this to older Razer keyboards, it's a step in the right direction. They're actually legible now. The keycaps feel pretty good to use as well. They aren't slippery and they are actually quite grippy. It's hard to say if they'll stay this way over time given their ABS, but yeah, there's just not enough time for us to know that yet. The top side of the deck is made from what I can tell is aluminium and has some serious weight to it. There is zero deck flex when you're absolutely giving the V3 a good old beating. The form factor of this keyboard for me personally is nice. The main difference here between a 60% deck is the inclusion of the delete key, the page up key, the page down key, and the insert keys, which doubles as macro keys as well. The version we have here is the Razer Yellow version, which are linear silent switches that have dampening on them for when the keys bottom out. Actually like the feel of these switches. I think Razer's done a pretty good job with these yellow switches overall, and traditionally I'm not a clicky switch kind of guy, so the yellow Razer switch would be my pick out of these or the greens, but here's how they sound. The Razer Blackwidow V3 Mini Hyperspeed is nice to type on. At first, I had my doubts given I don't usually like anything smaller than a regular TKL, but the V3 Mini is, I surprisingly didn't have any issues with it. I didn't even mind that there weren't function keys. Usually I would rant and rave about that, but I found that when I actually tested these keyboards and I played games with them, I didn't need to use them. So yeah, it wasn't a big deal at all. I didn't even notice them not being there. And that's not saying that it wouldn't annoy you, but for me on this occasion, I was okay with not having a function key row. It's got a few other tricks up its sleeve too. The keyboard can be used wirelessly with the dongle and have multiple Razer devices paired with a single dongle. This saves you some USB ports. And now I've seen that there's lots of issues with this right now, and I don't have any other wireless Razer devices to test this, so yeah, we're up the creek without a paddle on this one, but I thought I'd mention it since it sounds cool, but from what I've heard, it's just not there yet. You can also use Bluetooth to pair it wirelessly, and it'll also allow you to pair the keyboard to multiple devices. I like the addition of Bluetooth on wireless keyboards, but I always have issues when reconnecting to devices and they tend to not work very well for me, so I don't use Bluetooth usually with keyboards like this. As far as battery life, they're claiming 200 hours of battery life. What they aren't telling you is that that's with no illumination. That's classic Razer marketing right there. As far as with illumination, it really depends on the lighting pattern or the brightness, so it's pretty hard to say for sure, but you can bet your bottom dollar that it's going to be nowhere near 200 hours. I'd say you'd probably get 10% of that if you're lucky. As mentioned earlier in the video, the V3 Mini can be controlled in Razer Synapse. Yep. It's not the worst software, but yeah, it's just not good either. And Synapse allows you to do all the macros and all that jazz and all that stuff. The thing that really makes the Razer Blackwidow V3 Mini Hyperspeed stand out to me is the fact that it's wireless. We basically exclusively only cover wireless peripherals these days, as that's what I prefer to use myself, and I think the V3 does what it's designed to do, be a wireless RGB keyboard. But what it says on the box is one thing, and it being a good keyboard is a whole different story. And this is where this video takes a little bit of a turn. One of the most common things we see on our keyboard content is people always say they wished whatever keyboard we were talking about had hot swap switches, or should have been this way or that way or one way or the other, or you should just build a custom keyboard. Sometimes I agree, and other times that just doesn't make sense. As far as the V3 Mini, they're really pushing it to be an off-the-shelf solution that is something for everyone. However, as usual, the Razer Blackwidow V3 Mini Hyperspeed comes with that attached Razer tax. More on that later. I want to talk about my experience using this type of keyboard for my purposes, because some of you guys might look for the same things in keyboards that I do from a content creation standpoint, which is my primary use case. The V3 Mini is usable. The only thing I miss is having the numpad, but again, with this type of keyboard, you're not buying it to have a number pad. You know exactly what you're getting yourself into. For gaming, this keyboard is decent. I didn't feel like it impacted my playstyle or my ability to be pretty terrible at games. The only real issue I had with this keyboard is that elongated chin. It felt like the keyboard should have included an optional wrist rest, and that said, like a magnetic wrist rest would have been really good here. For my extended use, I actually used a wrist rest from another keyboard because it felt quite uncomfortable. Maybe it's just me, but for the premium price you're paying for this keyboard, a wrist rest would have just made it that little bit more justifiable. But again, more on that later. I also wanted to mention that if you're using the V3 Mini with the KVM, you shouldn't have any issues with it working through a KVM, and I tested it and it worked fine through my level 1 Tex KVM, and shout outs to Wendell for the KVM, video on that one coming pretty soon. Okay, up until this point, most of the stuff I've said is pretty positive, right? Wrong. I'm not saying the Blackwidow V3 Mini is an outright bad keyboard, because it's not. In fact, I did enjoy my time with it with a few exceptions. The first thing I didn't like about it is, I've already mentioned this, right? I found it really uncomfortable to use without a wrist rest. The bottom chin was the main reason for this. It's unnecessary, and although the keyboard is a 65% deck, with that chin, it just makes the keyboard bigger than it has any business being. I get that it's part of the Blackwidow lineup, and that's what it needs to be called a Blackwidow, but maybe not call it a Blackwidow and remove the chin. I don't know, just an idea. I don't like the finish on the keyboard chin as well. It's a fingerprint magnet. I mean, come on, it's a keyboard. You're literally going to have your fingers on it all of the time. At least make the finish resistant to fingers and grubby fingerprints. My Amiga 1200 is almost 30 years old and has better fingerprint resistance than the Blackwidow V3 Mini. Right? It's a keyboard. Make it resistant to fingerprints. What? Lastly, the price. The Blackwidow V3 Mini is going for an eye-watering $179 US or 300 Aussie dollar it is. $300? $300? That's ridiculous for what you're getting. There is nothing special about this keyboard to justify the price. The price is just way too high. If it was like $150 or like 200 AUD, maybe. If it hadn't included wrist rest, maybe $200, but $300? Razer's out of their goddamn mind. It's a good keyboard, but it's not $300 good. Now, I know I'm going on a bit, but honestly, what were they thinking? The Razer tax is real, ladies and gents, and this is the perfect example of it. Now, I've got hope that Razer will someday release something like this at a decent price, but until then, given the price alone, I can't recommend this keyboard. If you're a Razer fan and you absolutely need this keyboard, go right ahead. Otherwise, admire this thing from afar, kind of like what I'm doing now. But let us know what you guys think about the Blackwidow V3 Mini. You already know how I feel about it. It's a good keyboard, but this thing is just too expensive for what you're getting. It's just not worth 300 Aussie dollars. Simple as that. I don't get who prices these things. It's crazy. Anyway, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. If you hated the video, hit the dislike button twice. Once again, thank you so very much for watching. I'm your boy Nick with Gear Seekers. You peek, we seek. And again, I gotta be absolutely honest. Like, this keyboard is really nice to use. I did enjoy gaming with it, but 300 Aussie dollars for a 65%? That's not custom.